Howdy, Bethany. Can you hear me okay? Can anyone hear me right now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, weird. My headset doesn't seem to be connecting. Say something, somebody. It's not working.
Hello, hello.
Oh, it works. Okay. Phew. All right. Thanks so much. We'll wait here to see. Wait a couple of minutes, of course. Probably 5 after till we get going. I'll keep waiting here another couple minutes to let people trickle in. How's everybody's Wednesday morning so far while we're waiting here?
Pretty good so far. Nice slow start today, but
Nice.
weather's nice.
Nice. Yeah, pretty sunny here in Broomfield, so not too bad.
And your
I
background
know,
looks empty today.
yeah, I'm moving out, so it's pretty sad in here. So, but yeah, it's happening. So I'm not. I got a ton of responses back from my reminders last week and a couple weeks ago, and yesterday and today. Just the people are on vacation and away, so we'll see if this turns out to be much. But I definitely want to have a conversation and discussion with what we're trying to accomplish. Kind of get an idea if those that are in the call today can provide their input if we think we're going in the right direction with the Clean School Bus EPA grant. So and other efforts. But I'll wait one more minute here, but it looks like this might be it. So All right, well, no one else is joining, I don't think so. We'll just start. This is Jason here. I don't know if this is a first time for any of you here, but Jason with Northern Colorado Clean Cities. And this is our fourth discussion this year with rural school districts, mostly talking about different ways to adopt alternative fuels for transportation, on-road and off-road vehicles and devices. So we're kind of dabbling into the possibility of helping with chainsaws, converting those to electric, or blowers and weed eating and mowers and different devices. So I do appreciate you joining in today and joining the discussion. With me today is Diego Lopez, our Executive Director of the Save Energy Coalition. So you'll hear Northern Colorado Clean Cities, if you're familiar with that. That is was originally the nonprofit's name. We're going to keep that name and just focus on Northern Colorado with that. That's where my focus is at. And then Diego is focusing on kind of multi-states, along with Lacey Aller, who's here, and Desiree Moore. They're both working with us on their own programs. So today I wanted to that's a quick introduction there. What I wanted to talk about real quick is the kind of the direction that we're heading right now. Is we're shooting to see if it's possible to apply as a third party for the Clean School Bus EPA grant. And it's we're definitely finding the interest, even with folks on vacation and away right now the last couple of weeks. I've heard same kind of complaints, you know, that the EPA grant comes out right about the wrong time of the year, at the end when people are gone. I'm having a heck of a time just connecting with folks. But when I do connect, and I mention what we're trying to do, which is rural communities, frontier communities have always been kind of left behind for decades. And it's across the board. It can be for transportation, it can be for medical education. It's across the board as far as very broad as what they haven't had access to, where the city and urban areas do. And we all have identified that. We all know it exists. It's a gap that's exists for forever. And what I've tried to do is see if the EPA grant is actually really trying to bring forward or bring the option to have them more of a collaborative joint application. So all of their answers so far from what we've gotten is, you know, a consortium or a collaborative group of the 16 schools that we have reached out to that have confirmed up to 38 buses that they could replace in a 5-year period. If they had a propane or a CNG or a battery electric network at the neighboring school districts, and it was there and it was reliable and stable, then those school districts might be looking at replacing up to 73 buses in total in that 5-year period. But that's if they get a reliable, stable network. Part of our approach in all of this, what we would like to do through SECo, Save Energy Coalition, and Northern Colorado Clean Cities, we'd like to provide a AFLEET audit with each of those school districts that can contribute some time to work with us to get data, to analyze their entire fleet, again, on-road, off-road vehicles. For the Clean School Bus, it's a focus on passenger vehicles, 10 passengers or larger. So it's pretty large of the types of vehicles that can be replaced with the Clean School Bus grant money, and that's going to cover propane as an option, CNG as an option, or battery electric. So I'm just going to go through real quick. Is there any questions real fast, and then I'll lead on to the AFLEET audit, kind of real quick overview of what that looks like. Again, it's to prepare a school district. It'd be unbiased. There's no obligation, no cost to the school district other than finding someone to provide the time, like we have Bethany Oren here with West Grand School District that provided some data. We're able to put that in the AFLEET tool and provide back a report that can be used for your board of directors, can be used for your council, for your city, for whoever, to try to help plan out the adoption of alternative fuels. Any questions? All right, Gary, welcome to the conversation. So I'm going to share my screen here. I've got a big monitor, so I'm going to try to make this a little more visible. I'm going to go through our AFLEET. Hopefully you don't see this annoying controls here, but if you do, let me know. I don't know. Oh, there we go. All right, so I'm going to go through this really fast. It's just going to be a very quick introduction. Don't worry about the speed that I go through it. It's nothing to like really have to take too many notes. I'm just going to go through it real fast and show you kind of the process of the unbiased information. Again, this is here to hopefully be provided if we can pull it off, if we can find the funding, if we can get the support from utility, whoever, the state, CDOT, to help us find out what the major objectives are from the rural school districts and the municipalities from adopting alternative fuels. So real quick, our collaborators who makes this possible, U.S. Department of Energy, Argonne, NREL, Colorado State University. Right now, Poudre Valley School District, City of Steamboat Springs, Larimer County, City of New Haven. Those are all areas that we're working with right now to provide AFLEETs. I'm going to skip that. The transportation analysis. So we're not coming to you as a battery electric vehicle OEM saying, buy our products. We're not coming to you saying battery electric is the only option. We're saying we're going to provide this for you if we can, if it's possible. And this is information that you can utilize to try to help plan your next 5 years or however long you've got. So whatever your fleet is now, we can analyze that, tell you where to start, where to go, and then it's up to you if you want to move forward or not. So GHG, air pollutant emissions, reductions, payback period, total cost of ownership, vehicle comparison. These are all areas that we want to cover. A little fast there. We're going to be looking at the demand rate. So what's the charging side analysis? So looking at battery electric, what are your demand rates? What are the utility upgrades? What are the renewable energies that are possible? What type of recommendations do we have for the types of stations? So we're looking at your overall infrastructure. What's the most cost-effective upgrade for your school district in order to adopt alternative fuels? If it's going to be CNG, who do we have for the workforces around that to support that? What do we need to enforce that to help that? If it's for battery electric, again, who's the workforce to fix those things? So we're trying to really help build the broader picture, and again, no obligation. The emissions reductions recommendations. What are your vehicle operations? What are your well to wheels? So currently, what are the petroleum use? Is there any idle reduction that can happen in order to help reduce GHG? Sometimes it's just basic education that's necessary, and that's something we can totally help with. The energy efficiency recommendations, lifetime annual energy use. So over that lifetime of the vehicle, it might be 8 years in the city urban, it might be 25 years in the rural frontier areas. So we're going to tell you, like, over that lifetime, this is the amount of energy you're expected to be using. So I'm going to skip on here real quick. These next steps here is if you're interested in knowing more about an AFLEET report and you want to move forward with it outside of the clean school bus and you'd like to talk more about, this is kind of the next step. So we do an introduction, we get your fleet information, we get your building your facilities information, We get your route information that can be high level where it's just mileage, or we can really get into turn for turn and elevation and everything that the seasonal, anything that might affect gas usage, and then the distributed energy resources information. So where we're going to provide you with the resources of, again, how to get the infrastructure and how to get the fleets together to support that. And then at the end of that, we're going to present it to you, and then we can be there with you for, again, board meetings. We can help explain what the options are and what routes you might want to take. Going to skip this. This is kind of the cost to us. So again, it is kind of costly per school district. We anticipate anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 of time to do an AFLEET report for one school district. And if we want to get that done for this round of the Clean School Bus EPA grant, probably highly unlikely, but I think it's worth the try, especially if we can find some extra funding to help push it forward. But we can, again, this is something, if you are interested, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Happy to talk to you about it and see how we can help out. Real quick, the required information, Bethany again sent me some information similar to this last week. So the vehicle types, these are the vehicles that they have in stock currently in inventory that are operating. And then they give us the vehicle type, the model year. We're looking at, again, very high level. What type of fuel does it use and how many gallons or kilograms or whatever the unit is of energy per year for that vehicle to operate. And then from the audit, what's presented to the school district or to the fleet is something that's pretty elaborate. It can be 15, 20, 30 pages long, explaining, again, hopefully answering all the questions that someone in a school district or a municipality might feel is important to know. And if there's any input that we have on these, please give it back, because we try to make this as simple as possible for those that have trained eyes to understand and get to the point. So payback, lifetime energy emissions, we kind of talked about that already. Total cost of ownership over the life expectancy of the vehicles that you're replacing, infrastructure recommendations, and then the overall summary. What are our recommendations? What are our infrastructure recommendations? The AFLEET tool, it's not pretty. It's pretty ugly. I'm not going to get into it. It's pretty complicated, but again, it can be very high level. It can give you a basic understanding, or we can really, really dive into it. So we'll skip all this stuff here. I think we'll probably, oh yeah, as far as there's on-road. So on-road are going to be your buses, your passenger cars, your trucks, right? The off-road stuff may actually be items like chainsaws. It could be UTV, ATV, lawnmowers. So things that are not, as far as the larger vehicles, probably class 4 and up is the stuff that we'll be looking at as on-road. And that's it for this. So I'm gonna just, again, it's really fast introduction as to what it is we do with the AFLEET analysis, and what we're hoping to accomplish and provide. Personally, it'd be great if all the school districts in the entire state were offered the AFLEET or some sort of unbiased, here's all your options, no obligation analysis of where they're at currently with their fleet, instead of self-fending for themselves with 20 or 30-year-old vehicles. So I'm gonna stop sharing that. Any questions right now? Quiet group today. No questions. All right. Well, so I'll go over the Clean School Bus EPA grant a little bit and kind of what we're anticipating may happen. Again, the EPA is allowing the ability for multiple school districts to work together, and that would be requiring them to work under a third party, so someone that is going to be applying on their behalf with all the information. It does look like an SF 424 is required per school district that participates for 16 school districts or more, because we are still getting some interest, raise hands. It's a lot of work. And again, with everybody on vacation, the likelihood of that happening, or with smaller school districts, I don't know if that's going to happen too quick. So if it can pull off, or if we can prepare for a future clean school bus EPA grant, I think it's totally worth it. We're not being told by anyone that it's the wrong direction. So we think we're headed in the right direction. The idea is to get everyone's information in, make sure that we understand the school buses that they plan to replace in that 5-year period, get that as a minimum count. So if worst comes to worst, budget cuts, the school district may only expect to replace 1 in 5 years. And in best case scenario, they would replace 5. So we're getting that kind of a delta. The lowest number we have right now is 38 buses, which surpasses the minimum requirement of 25 school buses required for the clean school bus from at least 4 school districts. So we have 16 school districts interested, 38 buses minimum. If everything was great and we had a good, solid CNG or propane or battery electric network established among neighboring school districts that compete in sports, that have special events, that go to golfing, or maybe they go to weekend ski trips, any of that kind of stuff could be supported by a network that is established within the next 5 years with this money. And again, if it doesn't work for this round, there's always the upcoming rounds, and hopefully there's some more allowance there, some leniencies. So as far as the requirements to participate, right now, if we skip out the audit, we don't provide that. We need the SF 424 filled out. We need to know what your school district plans to replace in that 5-year period, what they hypothetically would like to replace in the 5-year period. We need to get some numbers from that, and we need to throw all this together and have it done in the next probably 3 to 4 weeks. The application is due August 22nd, and we'd like to get it in early, but we'll see how that goes. And again, if we don't make that deadline, then we'll probably continue the efforts, hopefully, keep working on growing that number, and to see if we can get, maybe 70 or 80 buses in that line to replace. Any questions so far on what we're trying to do with the clean school bus or the audit? Anybody have any questions or input? I'll continue. So again,
Jason, how successful is it right now connecting school districts?
It's like 50-50. Like if I leave a message, I might get a call back, and then I usually get emails back that just say people are on vacation. So, or they're away. A lot of people responded back Monday, that they may or may not be able to make it. So, but I think the people that are sometimes making the decisions, if we need the signature of the superintendent or a principal or something, that financial officer, this time of year is tough. If it was released in the fall, or before the budgets are right now, like a lot of the schools I talked to, I think Holyoke, not Ward, but Ray, their budgets are exceeded, right? They're waiting till the new school's budget, which is going to be like the early August. They can't even get they can't even raise their hand in interest, because they can't officially say anything until they get support. So the response, though, when I talk to Boulder Valley, or I talk to Moffett, Steamboat Springs, West, East, Grand, even out in Meeker, but reach out to folks. The idea is they eventually, school districts want to adopt battery electric, but for the price of 1 BEV, even though you can get it covered with costs, and funding, might buy 3 or 4 CNG or propane vehicles with this, the help of the clean school bus. So it's very, it's just not cost effective yet. And ideally, if someone was to adopt propane or CNG for their school district, we can get the other neighboring school districts to do the same, so that if you have an event, there's an emergency or you need to refuel, that is never at people's minds, worrying about the refueling issues. And then
Okay.
battery electric, possibly, it's very possible to get some of that infrastructure installed, ready to go, even if you don't have a battery electric vehicle. It's possible to get some electric vehicle charging infrastructure prepared. So other school districts that do have those vehicles can come to yours and support that movement. If
Okay.
that answers.
Yeah, so in the market research, I guess, that you've done so far, you think school districts are perceptive to working with each other to to reach the goals of getting a certain amount of buses replaced?
Yeah, I think so. I think that people are wanting to get out of the loop of missing out on opportunities. And the only way that that's going to happen is if we can find the champions within each school district to kind of take that foot forward and see if they can work together. It makes sense to have a network. It makes sense to have supporting fuels in each district. Casey Young had recommended, it'd be great to have these with Steamboat Springs. Great to have a card and a propane station somewhere else, or another school district can be able to refuel if necessary. But most of the CNG and propane vehicles or especially propane, are going to be hitting the same kind of mileage as the diesel are and gas are. It's just newer technology. It's safer. It's more environmentally friendly. It is GHG reduction, and with the Clean School Bus grant, it's about $30,000, I believe, for a propane, and maybe $40,000 for a CNG. So it does make sense to adopt those. Then it's of course it's cheaper than a diesel or a gas vehicle. So that's
Are you calculating the cost for infrastructure?
As far as Diego,
for schools that want to adopt propane, they'll need a propane station. Are you including the cost of infrastructure for your comparison?
I believe the cost of infrastructure is partially covered by EPA for either of those three fuel types. No. So you've got the battery electric, obviously charging infrastructure, whatever. If utilities aren't willing to help with it, then that is something that has to be budgeted. The $30,000, $40,000 saved from the CNG from one purchase should be a substantial amount to help cover the costs, hypothetically, of those CNG stations or those propane fueling stations. From what I've understand for propane, small school districts could start with like a U-Haul, a Cenex. They could start with a local propane distributor and fueling station and try that out, and budget that out, figure out what it's going to cost them instead of having their own system. But from the school districts I've talked to, the propane systems are very easy to use and they're happy with them. And that's what Boulder had mentioned a couple of days ago, that it's easy for the school district, it's easy for the drivers, for maintenance. So that was kind of their push for propane. If that answers the question, Diego, do you know more? Can you input more on that?
No, my suggestion would be that a fleet analysis is needed in order to make that recommendation. If schools do not have a propane station near them, we need to put in the installation cost of a propane station, because it wouldn't be free. It wouldn't be covered by the utility. And primarily, as you know, the utility and the state of Colorado are only wanting to support electrification. If you're wanting to look at matching funds, you're only going to look at electric vehicles. So that's just another reason or benefit of doing a fleet analysis first.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the, I mean, again, that's what we, that's our nonprofit. That's one of the services we provide. We want to be able to show that that there are options for school districts that may have 20, to 30-year-old vehicles, that those could be upgraded or replaced with something more efficient and effective, safer, cleaner. But a lot of the times they don't know that those options exist. And so the only way for us to prove that is really through the AFLEET. They can trust us to make recommendations. But even at that point, it's kind of a guessing game. If the school district really has their heart set on, it's approved and they know they're going for propane and they know which vehicles they're going for, probably can still help out as far as, really reiterating, are those the most important vehicles? What's the most cost effective down the road? What's the best investment for the school district? So we're happy to look at estimates. We're happy to look at and provide input. But Diego is correct that the analysis is really probably the only way to really effectively understand the fleet of a school district, or any fleet for that matter. And as far as the infrastructure goes, that's going to differentiate as far as costs go. If you're in Excel territory, a lot of folks are pretty lucky under that, because a lot of the infrastructure may be covered for battery electric, not for CNG, not for propane at the moment, but that might change in the future, because some sort of transition is necessary to get to battery electric in the next 10 to 15 years. So this is called the messy middle. And that's the term in the industry. The messy middle is the next 5 to 15 years of transitioning society from petroleum base to alternative fuel base. And it can be wind, it might be magic in the future. Who knows what causes it and what allows it to happen, but we're preparing for that. And right now, what I'm experiencing is that battery electric is such a huge push. It's almost seen as the only option. And it's not really acceptable in rural areas. It may be acceptable for city urban, but in those rural areas, the funding that exists to help for the infrastructure isn't really there. For either CNG or propane, it's kind of fend for yourself or get the funding elsewhere. And the only way that we can make it happen is to get enough people involved to go back to the state, go back to federal. I mean, EPA is here, they're listening. We don't have anybody here. I don't see anybody from the state, unfortunately. But I'm in email contact. It would be nice to have someone, or utilities, to say, hey, there is, there's a need that is not being met by society, by government, by whoever involved to fulfill what's necessary in the rural areas. We know that those, again, said at the beginning, the gaps exist. We see it, we understand it's there, but there's not really a lot of initiative happening to bridge that divide. And that's what I think we have the chance to do, is to try to emphasize that this help is necessary to move forward. Otherwise, the money will disappear. And again, school districts, if they don't have a champion, if they don't have someone to lead that effort, they're left behind. And then people scratch their heads. How come small communities never upgrade or never update? So that's kind of my perspective on it, that we have to start working together in order to help the areas that have not had the help. It's our responsibility to try to help those areas. Any questions? Anything else?
Hey,
So yeah,
Jason, just Bethany from West Grand.
I
I was just curious. This is starting my 24th year. Well, July 1st will just for your knowledge, the state of Colorado, our fiscal year for schools starts July 1st through June 30th. And we're all kind of on that same calendar as my understanding, but I've been trying to gather more information on propane. For us, CNG is not an option just because of we're geographically challenged for that. But even Little Kremling has 3 places that we could fuel a propane bus without having to put a tank on school property, which some of our administrators, for whatever reasons, are hesitant about that. But so I've been trying to learn as much as I can about propane to present to our superintendent this week. And they say that propane actually has a smaller carbon footprint than the battery electric. So I'm wondering why the dollars available for propane are so disproportionately smaller than those for battery electric. And I love our electric bus. It's been the best addition to our fleet, but the limitations when you live in a rural area, it's a long way to travel to other districts for athletics or activity trips or whatever. And I think propane for a lot of us is the ticket because the fuel costs half as much, and yet you're still getting all the benefits that you do for decreased emissions. But it's just frustrating that the dollars aren't there for propane. And I don't know if there's something I feel, to reassure Lacey, I feel as a school district, we work incredibly well cooperatively, and everybody, I probably average 150 emails and calls minimum each school year asking for feedback on our electric bus, which has been 100% positive. But it's just frustrating that that the range is so small relatively. So, and now the last bid I looked at for an electric bus was $510,000. And for a propane, it's 178. So you'd think that the government would want to do, we're getting hopefully our last diesel bus delivered the end of this month or next month. And hopefully my legacy will be this district never buys another diesel or gas bus, because propane can perform as well, better range, half the cost per gallon. Like, it seems like it has so many benefits. I don't understand why there's not more funding for propane.
That's a really good point. And I guess my question, and Diego or Yuchen, you might have an answer to this. In the past, when 20 years ago, 30 years ago, in the 90s, when propane was being pushed, when we did have propane vehicles being purchased, was the grant money there at that time to cover more of the costs? Whereas now it's, kind of, now we've got BEV, right? So now those 2 alternative fuels are not as, they've been around, they had the funding in the past. Diego, do you know if that existed where it's just kind of, we're at the trickling at the end of the funding for these types of fuels? Anyone have any input?
The simple answer, and I wouldn't want to speak for Lynn from the EPA, but this is a top-down approach where our governor and the president have chosen zero emission vehicles. And the issue is, as great and as clean as propane is, it not being zero emission is the issue. Now, if it came from a renewable source, renewable propane, if we had like a renewable fuel standard, that's where I think more funding will come about. Once Colorado passes a renewable fuel standard, then we can see tons of renewable fuels and alternative fuels get that type of funding back. But until that time, we're only going to see that one, which is probably electric, zero emission vehicle or zero emission fuel being funded. So that's really more of a, again, it's a leadership type of approach that maybe we need to educate that we need low emission to be funded proportionately in accordance to just zero emission, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's the current now, right? It's
or by the way, LIM from EPA, do you have any, is that pretty much what you would say is why, zero emission vehicles are being more supported from kind of the federal grants?
Yeah, hello. So yes, there is a heavy push towards zero emission vehicles, and from the industry perspective as well, there's a lot of money and research going into zero emission battery electric school buses, but not a whole lot of money going towards propane or natural gas CNG buses. So I think from a federal perspective, we're trying to expedite that transition, and by providing more proportional funding for electric school buses and promoting them, I think we're trying to create that cost parity and create that demand on the industry side in order for them to both bring down the cost over the long term and also put more money towards the development of battery electric and zero emission school buses. Obviously, from a greenhouse gas and emissions reduction perspective, all the technologies are equally successful at reducing emissions from tailpipe emissions from school buses. So from that perspective, from a dollar to dollar perspective, CNG and propane might be cheaper, but I think currently we're trying to create that transition right now for battery electric school buses right now. And that's why we're providing up to $395,000 per school bus for electric, and only, I think, as you mentioned, $30,000 to $40,000 for propane and CNG, which I guess one of the shortfalls of our program is that it's a national program. So I think Region 8, the region that I'm headquartered out of the Denver office, we have a lot of challenges, specifically in regards to some of our more rural school districts, that BEVs might not be an option for you, and that we're not providing proportionate funding for CNG and propane is an issue. And we have been raising it, and we have been trying to advocate on behalf of our school districts. But again, it is a national program. So the program is developed out of our headquarters office in DC. So they have to consider the entire nation and all of the regions within the country when developing these programs. So obviously, we are taking this feedback back to our headquarters office for the development of future rounds of funding. And obviously, we do have two separate programs, a grant and a rebate program. So hopefully one of the programs does work for the school districts, for rural school districts, but definitely a consideration and something that we've heard and something that we are taking back.
Thanks, Lim. Do you have any idea from previous EPA rounds for different types of alternative fuels, like for propane, or when CNG became available and was pushed for school districts? Do you have any idea, not a question that can probably be answered right now, but if there's any idea if what the demographics were for those served? So as the program might have existed, a clean school bus right now lasts 2 or 3 years, right? However many rounds that goes, and then it goes through a new reiteration. Whatever the life expectancy is of that program, are they successfully helping rural areas and frontier areas, or is it balanced? Is there equality that reaches out to all those areas where through every program it's worked? Because it doesn't seem like that. And being and growing up in rural communities and having my dad be my principal and go through weekly, if not monthly, budget cuts through the 80s and 90s, it never really seemed to be that the rural areas had the same capabilities and abilities to take on that money, that funding. So even though the EPA is pushed and considering talking about it, I wonder if there's a pattern from previous grant programs where rural frontier did not get served equally. Because that's what I'm observing is happening. And what I don't want to happen is that we do all this effort, we get 16, 20, 30 schools involved, we apply for SF 424s in the mid of summer here, we apply for the grant, it's not awarded, and we miss out on another opportunity. And that pattern exists and keeps going and going and going again, unless we have a champion like Bethany here or whoever is on the call that is forefronting it for their community and their school district, kind of out on a limb and kind of alone. So in order for school districts to even get propane, which is 30 years old as far as school districts that have had it in other areas. So you could say maybe they're 10, 20, 30 years behind. How do you scale what you're doing, the EPA, to make it work for the rural school districts? It needs to be that direction rather than the same qualifications and requirements that for city urban. It doesn't work and it hasn't worked. So that's my input, Lim. If you can pass that on. I just feel like it's an endless struggle for rural areas to try to get help. The questions that Bethany has with propane, it has the distance, it can do everything that they needed to do. There's 3 fueling stations in her tiny town of Kremling. That kind of goes the same with Senex's farm supply or Murdoch's. They've all got propane available. So with our conversation today, I'm hoping to get a little more enlightenment about where we're all at and what the struggles are that exist. And Bethany, I think you've answered that in previous school district roundtables that it's kind of just you mow the lawns, you take care of the buses, in addition to worrying about grants and trying to do what's best for the students and the staff.
And
So,
Jason, this is Trudy from
Trudy.
Cooperative School District.
Mm-hmm.
So I would tell you that the budget cuts have not stopped. They didn't stop in the 90s. They are still very real. And I think the other challenge we're facing right now, you've seen it on the news, DPS is closing schools, Jeffco closed schools, Boulder Valley is looking at stuff. Poudre School District, we're not there, but we're all seeing these projected declining enrollments. And when you look at how we get funding, how public schools are funding, it's a per pupil thing. That's the primary source of funding. There's some additional that comes from mill levies or bonds, and then there's grants. But I think that's the other challenge that we're looking at is with declining enrollment, budgets are continuing to get cut, and that continues to be an issue for us. And the infrastructure thing, I agree with you. Excel's program is great, but outside of Excel, there's not a lot out there to cover the cost of infrastructure, and that's a big cost. That could be anywhere between $50,000 to $100,000, depending on if you have to set a new transformer, can you even get a new transformer, how long are you going to have to bore, what's the distance. So those infrastructure costs, there's a lot out there to cover chargers, but the infrastructure is a challenge for us.
Yeah, I talking to Hayden, talking to again others. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. Talking to other communities, people would adopt battery electric, but the cost, again, we're going to get one bus. It's 100 miles distance. If it's really cold out, we might have to have a kerosene or diesel heater in there to help out so we don't drain the battery. We can't go 100 miles one way. We can only go 40 or 50 and know that we can get back safely. So it's not the distance is the major holdup for most of the schools in rural. And then it's the infrastructure. If you've got that battery electric and you're in Steamboat and you want to go to Aspen, that works. They've got a charger. If you want to go to Steamboat and you want to go to Kremling, that works. If you want to go to Kremling and Moffett, that doesn't work, right? So like you can't. There's only 3 school districts that can work there in hundreds of miles, and then there's all these other school districts left out. So budget constraints. I'm sorry about public education. My dad was my principal. I understand it pretty well, and it's all very restrained. That's why I feel like federal government and state government needs to scale this to work with those areas, not the other way around, saying you have to meet our requirements. It's what can we do to help you meet your needs? Here's all the funding. Maybe we don't require an SF 424 for every single school district. Maybe we do it at a different time of the year that's more accessible and budgets are understood and they know what's going on. July 1st is wrapping around the corner. That gives me 4 to 5 weeks to get something together. It's just not enough time. So, but I'm going to keep trying and we'll see how this goes. So if any of you in the call want to speak for your utility, very surprised not to see anybody here from utility. I've reached out to a couple dozen the last couple weeks. So we'll try to get more in on our next conversation if we can. But any input or questions from anybody else?
This is Bethany again. Just huge kudos to you and Diego, because you've been invaluable for all of the districts up here in the nasty north. But I have a question for Lim. Just looking at the districts in Colorado that were awarded grant money, it seemed disproportionately low to me. And I'm not a statistician. I called statistics sadistics when I was in college. But it was frustrating because I know just in my little corner of the state, every district applied, and I've got a lot of friends across the state at other districts. I probably know, 30 places that applied, and so few, received any funding. East Grand County, our neighbor to the east, applied for 2 and got 2. We're the same demographic, though our district is poorer and smaller. We applied and got none. It was just really frustrating. So I was hoping that maybe the EPA could evaluate or publish data summarizing the number of applicants they had per state versus the number of grants awarded by state, because it sure seems like the less populated states were more handicapped than just the percentage of our diminished population.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. We definitely did notice that as well. So we did an internal evaluation of awards made based on school age population of each state, and we did see some lower numbers in our state, in our Region 8 states out west. And the rebate program was unique in the sense that school districts were chosen at random. It was a lottery process, so school districts were just pulled from a list using a random number generator, looking at just the quality of the application was not evaluated when making this decision because it was random. So thankfully in the grant process though, the 2 separate programs, as I mentioned earlier, the grant program does allocate specific funding to our Region 8 states. So we have a certain set aside amount of money based on that $400 million for this most recent grant program. The Region 8 states were awarded a little over 27 million. So that is money that we have for our states. So kind of the difference between the 2 programs in that sense, where we have a specific amount of money allocated for the grants program versus the rebate program. And obviously, the hope is that from the rebate program was that using a lottery process would just randomize the process, but obviously nothing is truly random. So even though that we did see a disproportionate amount of funding, a lower disproportionate amount of funding for that past round of rebate program, we're hoping that we can offset that by having a set aside for the grant program. So we did notice that as well, and we are hoping to make some changes in future rounds of funding for that rebate program, so it's not truly random, and we can have some more structure within that process of selecting school districts to be awarded under both programs.
And I've got a question to follow that up. Thank you for that. For the applicants that didn't get chosen, does that negatively affect their ability to apply again in the future?
No.
Okay.
So I guess it kind of goes both ways. Currently, there is no So if you were on the wait list before, you do have to apply again if you want another rebate. So it is not held against you if you didn't get selected last time. But on the flip side, if you were selected, there is no downside. If you apply again, there is no separate list that previous winners are in a lower tier or anything like that. So selected people from past rounds of funding can get selected again, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you. That actually is a good question. So thank you for the answer. Thanks. Anything else? What I wanted to do now is, there's no other questions or any comments. Again, I'll just emphasize
Hey, Jason, there's one last question that I would like for you to ask more schools as you are surveying them and including this audience is, when is a better time if the fiscal year is July 1st? When is the best time to consistently meet and consistently advocate for these schools? What is the best way to do that? Because again, they're getting 120 odd different emails for just EVs alone. We don't want to add to their work, but we want to support them. So when is the best time? Is this 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock the best time to continue this?
Yeah. I don't know. I think we've sent out a survey quite a while back, and this time seemed to work, but we can send out another survey and find out if we'd like to change this. We can have another conversation, at the beginning of July with the new fiscal year. As far as, kind of my concern earlier was like the timeliness of the EPA grant. And if there was an announcement like 3 months prior to that, even earlier, that this is going to happen, it might kind of help prepare schools that have an absence of people that are on vacation. So I think hoping that this gathering is actually smaller attended than the last one. So I'm thinking again, it's just kind of people are busy right now. Before we wrap it up here, 5 minutes for those that have to leave in 5 minutes. We're going to have an in-person event at West Grand School District with Bethany Aron and her fleet and arsenal. And we're going to try to make it, we definitely I've reached out to propane OEMs and distributors, and they're very interested in bringing some vehicles there. So it sounds like we'll have battery electric for sure, propane. Haven't had any confirmations for CNG yet. I don't know if that'll happen. But I did talk to Still, I talked to Toro, different OEMs that produce, kind of off-road options. Polaris and Kawasaki, we were in contact with a couple months ago. Supposedly at the end of the summer, Polaris will have more of their Ranger EV editions available. So we'll try to get those devices there, trying to get a bit of an interactive space together, spend the 4 hours communicating, discussions, testing out things, trying things out, just talking and having a good time. Probably have a lunch or something covered, and it'll be midday, so probably start around 11 and go till maybe start at 10, 11 and go till 1 or 2. That way people can get there and get back home. It's the in-service week for West Grand, most likely in-service week for a lot of other school districts. So if you can make it, it'd be great. And we just need to know, I'll get a survey out to everybody, kind of get an idea on, how many head count we've got. So for lunches and if we want to have any special guests there and speakers or discussions. So should be a fun little expo, little group gathering for rural school districts out there, and hope to see you guys be there if you can. So with 3 minutes to finish on this call, we have a half hour scheduled for discussion if anyone wants to stick around. So if not, we can end it at 10 o'clock. Any other questions or comments?
The thing I would offer is When you were saying like 100 emails just on EV buses, you are right. And right now, it's really overwhelming. You have all these manufacturers of buses calling because they want to do groups, to purchase buses. You have McCandless and Highland, and they want to
Yep.
do a group purchase, and you guys want to do a group purchase. And I can tell you that right now it's overwhelming. There's just everybody coming at you from so many different directions, and everybody just like, why aren't they all jumping on this? And it's because we're getting so many people coming at us, and I don't know if there's a way that like everybody can kind of start grouping into one group, but it
We've
really is
tried.
overwhelming right now.
We tried to work. We reached out to Highland, begged them to support CNG propane as options to allow that, and no.
Well,
Elac,
and
same
I'm just
thing.
talking
No.
just EV, because
Yeah.
like for our district, we do have propane buses, but you're right, the funding has gone, so
Yeah.
we're gonna have to move away from the propane because of the funding. But I would say right now 50% of my time is spent on calls talking about EV buses, and just like working through the grant. And this is the hard time of year, because when was the grant released? Was it the end of
May.
April
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
part of May?
Yeah.
And so when you think that's the end of the school year for everybody, and
Yeah.
everybody's trying to get graduates done, now you're right. Some people are off for the summer. Most facilities, transportation operations were year round. But like our grant writers, are gone. And so, if I was going to give feedback on timing, I would say announce the grant like in January and have it due like the end of April, so that we have 30-45 days. That's tight for school districts, because it's just hard. So that would be my feedback. And like I said, if there's just a way to I'm just overwhelmed with the number of emails and requests to attend conferences that I get for EVs. And I think I spent more time on conference calls than I do actually just being able to get something in place.
We're done. We experienced similar, probably not as bad, but just of companies, OEMs reaching out to us saying, "Hey, who do you know, and who wants to upgrade to BEV?" And it is overwhelming, and the money is there. The costs of the electric vehicles keep going up. They're not dropping. In the meantime, propane and CNG vehicles are going up, and the funding just isn't there to cover that. So then you're bombarded by EV nonstop. And I mean, Highland has told us several times, rural school districts don't really always work out for them. It's just not really always feasible. So they don't put a lot of energy into it. So that's, again, it's small populations just don't get the same type of attention, right? And you have to voice your opinion and say, this is too much for me. I'm over my head. I can't do this. Or there could be a bidding process from the state, like if a OEM comes in and says, I've got a new product. I want to help our Highland fleets. We're fleets. We want to help schools get these vehicles. It's just, I mean, I assume you have several jobs that you do, more than just fleet transportation director. So
yeah, I'm not the transportation director. I'm the energy and sustainability manager.
Got it.
Yes, EV buses is one tiny thing.
Yeah.
And it is your one-man show, one-woman show. It's hard, and it would be nice if, like the state of Colorado, like we have the Colorado Association of Energy Managers. We've even talked about starting our own group application for the buses. And, you know, it would be nice if maybe somehow somebody from the state level, like there could be one place that says, okay, school districts, this is it. This is the one place that we're gonna go for you guys to do a group purchase. Because I can tell you, my district can't afford 15 buses at once. I don't even know where we would find project managers to even implement 15 buses at once. It won't, it's not gonna happen.
Well, it's 15 buses over the course of 5 years, right? And Boulder Valley technically has budgeted 20 to be replaced, but you know, it's like not budgeted yet, right? In the 2024-25, it's 8 or projected. You know, they keep projecting what will be replaced, but
and they're much richer district than I am.
Totally. St. Vrain too. Yeah, St. Vrain too. But if you're looking at like anybody on our list, if I go across it here, it's the people that, you know, are the school districts are looking at 1 or 3 in 5 years possibly. So
that's where we're at.
And why not help those school districts, right? Why not get if Boulder Valley needs 8 in 5 years, great. If Steamboat wants 1 in 5 years and Pooter wants 2 and East Grand wants 2, then you know they should be helped. Otherwise, I just think it's passed by. So, but I do appreciate your time. So
easy. That's what makes me laugh. It's like, you know, people are like, yeah, well, so-and-so got an EV bus, and everybody thinks it's so easy, but they don't really understand, you know, dealing with the utilities, making sure your local response, you know, your fire departments and everybody are prepared to deal with some, God forbid, emergency, and just the cost. You know, there's just a lot of people that don't understand. And I will say, I think McCandless put on one of the best EV bus seminars we've ever attended last year.
Who was it?
McCandless.
Oh,
I think they sell ICs, internationals.
okay.
But they had people there that have actually implemented, and so you didn't get this song and dance. You got, this was real life, and you know, mechanics could talk to mechanics and go, really, guys, not that bad. It's really not that bad.
Yeah,
so
McCandless
it was really
actually
good.
Yeah, McCandless, the son of the owner, or the whoever's in charge now, I think his name is Adam. He was at the scrum that the state put on back in November, December. And it was really, or maybe it was even earlier this year, but very informative. And his support and the family support for electric vehicle, you know, it's coming down the line. They want their service centers to be able to facilitate and to help with that. They're already starting to sell vehicles. They're excited about hydrogen coming down the line. So yeah, it's good to hear. I'll reach out to them again and see if maybe they can join us on the West Grand.
And I don't know,
person.
Lightning E-Motors down in Loveland, we get bombarded from them too, but you know, they have the they have the smaller buses. They don't make the 71 passenger buses that we need for our district. So, you know, we get inundated from them too. And it just, like I said, it's like, I don't know how we get everybody to just all work together as one instead of all these people hitting us day after day.
I know, it seems like a waste of time, right? It's like the same thing with like all the school districts that applied for the EPA grant, randomly chosen. Good to hear that they're going to change how that is selected the next time. But it's just, everything seems to be way overcomplicated. And everyone, you know, there's so much competition out there for BEV right now. I mean, look at the money. Look at the money. We can build a bus for $500,000 and someone's going to pay us for it. They're not out any money. We're not. Great. So I hope, you know, for the sake of BEV, that we see double the distance in the next 5 years. We see, you know, half the weight, you know, safety issues are totally taken care of. But in the meantime, we have to have a halfway point.
Are you aware that the CDE has actually put out guidance, Colorado Department of Education, encouraging us not to use EV buses for our mountain routes? And it has to do with the braking system.
Could you send me that information? Because I honestly could not find. I actually read to Fred Stewart, or wrote to Fred Stewart and talked to him, and he said that there was nothing that stops. Maybe they're discouraging it, but there was nothing to stop them from doing it. And there was no roads that it was, unless it's a county or city deciding that. It's so
I've
from what
actually
I've
got an email from him from yesterday. So
oh,
that's
yesterday. Oh, okay. This was a couple weeks ago. Okay, yeah. Okay.
if I can figure
Interesting.
out where I put it.
Okay.
I can say as a transportation director, I haven't gotten anything from Fred all summer other than the, I believe Lion brand buses have now, their electric bus has now been approved for the state of
Oh.
Colorado. Prior, it could not
Wow.
pass the Kentucky poll test and the Colorado rollover test.
Roll.
So now we have two vendors in the state that we can choose from. But something, my major concern about the massive amount of funding that's going to electric buses, and people aren't talking about it, is that I was told our battery had a projected life of 8 years, and it's enormous. And I have grave concerns for the lack of funding that's going into researching recycling of the batteries and also safe disposal.
Just yesterday, Bethany, I'll forward you from the EPA. I think it was EPA. Someone yesterday just released new funding opportunities for recycling of batteries. So I'll totally send that to you. It's, you know, I think it was billions or something, but there's definitely push for it. And it's the process exists to completely dismantle and completely recycle every atom of the battery, but it's costly. And there are overseas companies doing it, you know, European companies and definitely Asiatic companies that are doing it because they're ahead of us when it comes to this stuff. But yeah, it's a really good point. Like it's preparing for the future. Now I think California has a 10-year minimum, like kind of warranty it has to cover. I think Colorado was gonna try to implement that, or maybe they already did, where the manufacturers have to provide a vehicle that has at least a 10-year life expectancy on the battery.
I think that would be awesome because the other thing that concerns me is to replace our battery is $80,000 when we purchased it 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
So you know, that's a big concern too. But
and that's a good point, Bethany, because when we started looking at, you know, placing an order with McCandless for a bus, they were offering the ability to pay for that first battery replacement up front, but you would pay for it up front in the cost of the bus. Now we were quoted $60,000, so it's really scary to hear like an $80,000 number. And what's your email, Bethany? I have this email from Fred.
I'd love to get that. It's AURINB at WGSD.US.
WGSD.US.
Okay. I'll type it in the chat, but thank you, Judy. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I kind of highlighted the section. It says it is the suggestion of CDE that current designed electric school buses operated in the state of Colorado not to be operated on mountain terrain.
Has to do with regenerative braking not kicking in until it's like 80% of the battery or less. So I don't know. I don't really see a problem with it personally because I'll never have above 80% when I'm going down them for me in Steamboat, I guess. So,
funny, yeah.
Well, and Trudy, so you know, the bus that our electric bus, its route is the most mountainous route we have. It goes from, you know, I think the elevation in Kremling is 7,260 or something like that. And it goes up to 9,500, and it's on a secondary road. It's paved, but it's like Pooter Canyon, you know, it's got the sign that we don't, you know, we don't maintain anything after 7 a.m. until 5 a.m. or 7 p.m. until 5 a.m. And I can tell you 100% of the time, I'm usually first tracks going up Gore Pass at 6:30, and it definitely hasn't had any attention all night. And our bus performs incredible. You know, it goes through a subdivision that's rarely plowed. Also, I've got, you know, the people that live in the subdivision now wait for the bus to go through so they can have me break trail for them. And it's done very, very well on icy snowpack roads, on heavily snowy roads. It's done great in the rain.
Do you
It
go
should work
off
for the post office.
like, do you go off the main highway up, you know, dirt roads to get to houses?
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know, because that's one of the things that I get, and definitely our Stove Prairie Red Feather routes. I'm surprised those big yellow things get through those roads in the first place, because I'm like, I can barely get my car around that corner.
Yeah,
Those
I went
drivers-
to CSU for 8 years and 3 degrees and lived up Risk Canyon almost to Stove Prairie. So I know that road well.
Wow.
But I think you'd be very impressed with the traction and performance of
That is
the
awesome.
electric buses.
Wow.
I'm glad I got on the call and could hear that. Because I think that helps a lot to hear it from an actual school district bus driver. Lends so much credibility.
Well, I can piggyback on that too. I find the regenerative braking better than a retarder, because you're not having to manually activate it, take your hand off the wheel. It just kicks on, and it doesn't, I don't know, it's pretty gentle application overall. So the driver I have who's been using just our one bus, fingers crossed we get all 7 going here in the fall, but she loved it. Like, I mean, in any condition, and I don't think we even, that's more of a city route, and I don't think we even put any kind of upgraded tires on it. I think I was just running the standard tires that it came with, which were just not the best, quite frankly. But yeah, she never had any issues with it at all. So
It's cool.
For you school districts that have done this, like, one of the weird things on the CDPHE application is working with your local emergency response teams. Did you guys, like, how did you do that when you got the EV buses?
I invited our fire department over before we even put the bus in service. Like, I think I let them know when it was being delivered, and they came the next evening and trained with it for probably 2 to 3 hours. And we've invited adjoining, you know, other departments in our county have also come over. And we've also had the EMS and the police department. And then we're very fortunate that we house the state patrol office on our high school campus right next to the bus barn. So
wow, okay.
it's been really easy. And you know, as an operator, they're such a simple vehicle to, you know, everything orange is dangerous, and things are very well protected. The turnoffs, you don't have to be a contortionist to operate. They're handy and right there. You know, it's like on the propane buses, you have to crawl underneath to get to the valve to shut the propane off. And with an electric bus, everything's, you know, line of sight, easily reached with, even if you're not very tall. So it's been super easy for us, and everybody, they're eager learners with our fire department and law enforcement, which has been nice too. So
And was that kind of the whole focus, is just understanding what's hot and what's not?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think too, for the grants, for any of the grants for state, the CDOT wants to know and CEO wants to know, what are the local response teams that are against or hesitant to want to support those vehicles. So that happened, and I think it was Pueblo, I forget, one of the school districts down there, they had received their school bus and the fire marshal said, no way. And then the state, came into it and got it all figured out. But it's just more of a hesitance and a fear of how to deal with it. So, Bethany, your approach to it is exactly what we're hoping that will become more available. Especially the OEMs are tending, what we've heard is they'll provide sometimes, or we're hearing it more, they're going to provide the training for emergency, for servicing. That way a local work group or local first responders have a real clear understanding what is happening. The truth of the matter is that EVs aren't new, but the moniker out there in the world is that they blow up. We've heard rumors, if two mirrors on two separate buses touch, they'll explode or they'll start a fire. Like if the mirrors touch, I don't know how that happens. We've heard a lot of really, fearful, like, what ifs since I've just been in it a year doing this now. So there's just a lot of that to kind of overcome and get past that. And with first responders, with what CDOT has provided this year for first response EV, super well attended, packed both days, even if it was bad weather one day. People are really getting into it, excited to try the vehicles. So it's that transitional yucky part that we're kind of in still right now. But for CDPHE, for EPA, definitely good to get in contact with local first response, say, hey, is this something, if we apply for it, is this something you can get behind? And would you be interested in learning more and getting that education and that training on it? So most of that training right now is free. And it probably will be for the next 2 to 3 years. So,
and given that CSU has a bus and the city of Fort Collins has 2 EV buses, I'm guessing that our local fire department was already aware, but
yeah,
yeah,
it's the rural ones that are tough, right? It's those rural areas that it's new for them. There's Priuses that drive through. There's hybrids; those have EV. Teslas now, drive through town or whatever it might be. But the school buses have this, or transit buses have a bigger, they're going to hurt people if something happens to them. So as if a gas fire is not bad, a diesel fire, but it's just, top of people's minds. So.
And hey, Trudy, one other thing I was going to mention is both Steamboat and Kremling had one of the largest snowfall years we've had in over 20 years.
Wow.
So the fact that the buses performed so well with an inordinate amount of snow was really impressive as well.
Was it traction control? Is that kind of what it all is? And just,
I think for us, I'd be interested what Casey thinks, but for us, same deal. We just have the tires that it came with. It's a Bluebird Type D. And I just think the weight is distributed really well. And, so you have great steering and great traction. And the brake regen, like Casey mentioned, I agree, I feel much safer keeping my hands on the wheel. And it's much smoother than even the first setting on a retarder. So, I can share it with you, Trudy. I've got a kind of a canned, when people inquire about the performance of our bus, I've got a document that I'll share with you that I send to people. And, there's definitely additional training needed for operators as a transportation director, because there's just some things that are different about an EV than on, a fossil fuel bus, but it's very minimal, and awareness is 90% of it. So.
Yeah.
And that's, when we had that big event at McCandless, I think it was Aurora that was there. And that's what their Aurora Public Schools, that's what their staff were saying too. It's like, you know, yeah, it feels scary because it's new and it's different, but they all said the same thing. Once you've had the training, you're kind of like, okay, this is no big deal. Yeah. So yeah, that's good to hear.
Yeah, I think it's from my experience, just talking to anyone that's been able to experience Casey's, you know, he shows up at the bus, they're able to drive it. I haven't ever met anybody in this industry yet that, you know, I've definitely met people that are like, I was against EV, but then I test drove it, and why aren't we doing this for everything? That's typically the kind of response. Like,
it's just
it's a no-brainer. Yeah, it's the cost.
It's the cost.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, because we don't meet that criteria. We're not rural. We argued we were rural and we lost. We're definitely not low income. And not a tribal nation. You know, to get 275 versus 375,000, you're in the hole on the cost of the bus by 125, 150,000 just to start. And now you haven't included the charger and the infrastructure.
Yeah. And then you're stuck there if a school district nearby doesn't have the same thing to help you, right? So you're not able to go as far. If there was places to hop, you know, between, maybe as infrastructure gets better, but the cost for BEV is very expensive.
For us, that's the infrastructure in neighboring towns isn't an issue because we have enough routes, depending on from the Midwest or Colorado, that, you know, we can use them just for in-town routes. So for us, it's not as important to neighboring places have them. It's just, you know, we want to get them in. We want to get the low emission. We know that Northern Colorado is a non-attainment area. Yeah.
Well, I do appreciate everybody's time that can stick around for this. So a little disappointed internally that more people didn't show up, but I think it's just, you know, next week, I think Diego I might be dropping down at the Pueblo. Anybody here going to the Pueblo conference down there next week?
Yes, EPA will be there. We're a vendor, and we also have 2 classes that we're planning to present information about the grant program at. So we'll be there. So feel free to say hi if you're around.
Yeah, will it be a questions and answer? Can we ask difficult questions?
Of course.
I'll put you in the spot. Okay.
Yep.
Just want to know. So thanks. Great. And does this, Lynn, does this seem accurate from what you're hearing from other parts of the country as far as the demographics of rural frontier areas? Is it a similar struggle? Is each state a little different? No. No comment. EPA is like that. They can only answer certain things. So
sorry, was that directed at me?
Yeah. So is it similar? Is it similar throughout the U.S., state to state, where the struggle for rural frontier areas that exists, where they just are having a hard time getting stuff together to apply?
Yes. There is the additional challenge of, you know, if you have to partner with other school districts or another vendor or a school bus manufacturer, there is that additional hurdle for you to even get your foot in the door, let alone get awarded under our program. So definitely a challenge, an additional challenge for those smaller rural school districts. But I think Colorado and the Rocky Mountain states also have an additional challenge of weather, cold weather, and elevation. So I think it's just a compounding like number of factors that make it significantly harder for these Rocky Mountain states, the rural Rocky Mountain school districts, to consider and get funded under a program. So definitely something to consider and to take back and to provide feedback on. But yes, the rural school district piece is a challenge everywhere. But I think it's more of a challenge in our Region 8 states because of just the states that we have. Other regions have larger metropolitan areas. So they meet the demand there. That there's enough demand for our programs that they don't have to worry. But in our Region 8 states, we do have to consider more significantly the rural areas because most of our states are rural.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for the answer. So, thank you. I think we'll wrap it up. 2 minutes left here on this 90-minute call. Totally appreciate you guys sticking around. Trudy, if you're interested in any more, I think, are you already working with Diego on a fleet analysis?
We did that through Excel's program.
Okay. Oh,
I have
okay.
schools that are Excel, so I could do that through one of those schools.
Do you know that they only provide input on electric, and they don't provide unbiased? They're almost as bad as a OEM, but they're great. But they're definitely pushing electric, right? So if you or other
and
school
that's
districts,
the direction we're going anyway.
Is
like
it?
I said, we already have propane, and with not being able to get funding anymore, we chose not to go CNG. The infrastructure cost to go CNG was outrageous. So we did go propane. We have 12 propane buses, but the last grant that we applied for to get more propane buses, we got denied, even though we had tanks in place at our facilities and everything. So we're okay with just looking at EV right now. Because we know we're not going to go CNG, and we can't get the funding anymore for propane.
Propane does have funding through Clean School Bus EPA for $30,000 a vehicle. So there still is funding, but
the last grant we applied for, we didn't get. Okay.
If you're interested in this collaborative effort, just let me know. We'll put you on the list. So,
Hey, Jason, I just have a quick question. On the SF 424, is that something we fill out through you guys, or is that through?
We would pre-fill it out and include it as an additional document on the application.
Okay.
So it's added to it. Yeah. And we kind of pre-fill it out and then send it to you. I think your superintendent has to be the one to sign it. Or if you've signed them in the past, you know who that dedicated person is. It's they're looking for, from what I've read, this will be my first grant for the last 15 years that I worked on personally, like I'm managing. So as far as I understand, the SF 424 required among each school district, and then the estimate of the funding that will be requested, right, for this specific grant. So we would need to know what buses you're planning to replace. What are the replacement costs for those, right? Can we verify that you're going to get rid of your old buses that you're replacing them with? So I think that document kind of verifies all that. Did you have any previous EPA or federal funding, federal funding, and what was it within the last 5 years? So kind of basic information that they asked, but we just anticipate it might take 2 or 3 weeks to get all those back from folks. So yeah, and other forms and other data. So, but do you out of everybody here, do you guys think we should continue pursuing kind of the collaborative efforts of the Clean School Bus EPA grant? I'm going to keep pushing for it. Does it sound reasonable what we're doing? Or
I mean, I think PSD is definitely interested in doing that. It's just there's so many people wanting us to jump on board. It's like, how do you decide who to jump on board with?
For us, we need a hand raise first, so we can go to utilities, we can go elsewhere, state CEO, CDOT, and say we need better support for this, and EPA, and then get the information in. So SF 424s get the data, figure out, get some estimates in. We can help you review those estimates. Again, unbiased. We'll just say, this is probably the route you want to take to be less overwhelmed in the long run. Right. And for your budget constraints.
And I mean,
and
it's the
then
timing
no obligation.
right now. It's like, because we know right now we've only got the capacity to deal with 2 chargers and 2 buses. So it's like we're in the middle of the CDPHE grant. So I don't think we'll hear back from that grant before the EPA group grant would be due. And then that's part of the challenge right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we know. Yeah, with CDPHE due soon, right? Couple weeks.
The 30th.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, new fiscal year. Thanks for saying that about Colorado. Good for me to know that when they have their new fiscal, but some people did respond, we won't know until August, if that's a possibility. So probably have to wait, for budgeting,
Yeah,
planning.
because I was
So
gonna say, we've already done our budget for 23-24.
yeah. Yeah.
So in a couple months, we'll start budgeting for 24-25.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you say your school district or anybody could just replace 1 bus with propane in those 5 years, then we'd put you on board. We'd find out the estimates for that 1 bus, kind of hypothetically when it might be replaced, 3 years, 4 years down the road. At the 5th year, it's going to be replaced, right? And then apply for it now. And then when that 5th year comes, you've got the funding and money to put towards it. Buses might be cheaper at that point, might be more expensive at that point, but you would have that chunk ready to go. So we're so far is, I don't know if Lim, you can say anything about this, but as far as our research goes, talking to the other 79 coalitions in the US, no one is taking an approach like this where it's a collaborative effort. Maybe with like 4 or 5 school districts, but not on the kind of capacity, and not really focusing on creating that network and expanding out from, an area. So it's not just randomly choosing who gets a BEV. So I think it's worthwhile. It may not happen this round, but we'll keep shooting for it. If there's any help that either of you need with the CDPHE grant, let me know. I'm happy to help with that part. So that process. So cool. I think that's it. We're over time. Long meeting. So
Well, thank you so much for putting this together.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Trudy.
Yep.
All right, Casey,
It's awesome.
everybody.
Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks so much. Have a great week, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. See y'all.